This is not a story about Greenland, and it is not a story about ice. It is a story about belief, and how belief quietly collapses. While the world is obsessed with Ukraine, the real shift in power is happening somewhere else, inside the Western Alliance. When Donald Trump demanded control of Greenland, this was not a diplomatic tantrum. It was a stress test. A test of how much pressure NATO could absorb before Europe began to doubt the one promise that holds it together. In Moscow, there was no celebration, no outrage, only careful observation. For nearly 80 years, the Kremlin has pursued one strategic objective: a fractured Atlantic world, a weakened NATO. Trump may never say that is his goal, but geopolitics does not care about intent. It only counts results. And here lies the paradox. The same president shaking Europe's confidence has also blocked Russia's ambitions elsewhere. So this is not a story of victory. It is a story of instability. If you want to understand how power really shifts, stay with me. Because before consequences unfold, we must first understand the problem itself. The problem is not Greenland, it is credibility. For decades, Europe built its security on a simple assumption: that the United States would always be there, not just with troops, but with certainty. That assumption is now under strain. When an American president openly pressures a NATO ally, the shock is not diplomatic, it is psychological. Because alliances are not contracts. They are beliefs reinforced over time. From Moscow's perspective, this matters deeply. Russia has failed for generations to break NATO from the outside. No invasion, no missile, no energy weapon ever did the job. But doubt might. Yet here is where the story becomes complicated. Because the same administration unsettling Europe has also refused to deliver Russia what it wants most: no fast deal on Ukraine, no imposed settlement on Kyiv, no rapid normalization. So Russia faces a dilemma. How do you benefit from Western division without provoking American retaliation? That tension defines everything that follows. And to understand it, we need to look backward at how this long confrontation was built. To understand this moment, we have to rewind. Not years, decades. The Atlantic Alliance was not built on trust alone. It was built on fear. After the Cold War, that fear faded. NATO survived, but its purpose slowly blurred. Europe downsized its militaries, outsourced deterrence, assumed peace was permanent. Russia watched all of this. For Moscow, the post-Cold War order was not stability, it was humiliation. The expansion of NATO eastward felt less like security and more like encirclement. So Russia adapted, not through open confrontation, but through pressure, energy dependence, political interference, information warfare. The goal was never immediate collapse. Ukraine became the fault line. A country caught between systems, between promises and realities. When war came, it exposed something deeper. NATO could still mobilize power, but unity required constant reassurance, and reassurance depends on leadership. That is the historical trap we are now in. A system designed for certainty being tested by uncertainty. And once that certainty cracks, events begin to accelerate. Which brings us to the first rupture. The rupture did not come quietly. It arrived through shock, not in Kyiv, not on the battlefield, but across the Atlantic. When Donald Trump escalated pressure over Greenland, the message was unmistakable. Alliance loyalty was now conditional. For Europe, this was a moment of vertigo, because the threat was not military, it was existential. If the United States could coerce Denmark, a founding member of NATO, then no ally was untouchable. In Moscow, this moment mattered, not because Russia planned the crisis, but because it revealed fragility. For decades, Russia had tried to split the West from the outside. Sanctions pressure, energy leverage, military intimidation. None of it worked, but this rupture came from within, and that is what made it dangerous. Yet even here, Russia hesitated, because while the alliance wavered, American power did not retreat. U.S. actions elsewhere were actively undermining Russian influence. So this was not collapse. It was something more unstable. A crisis without resolution. And unresolved crises have consequences. Because beneath the headlines, a deeper mechanism was already at work. What we are seeing is not chaos. It is a system working in reverse. Alliances weaken not when enemies attack, but when guarantees become negotiable. The hidden mechanism is simple and ruthless. When credibility erodes, every actor recalculates. Europe begins to hedge, investing more in autonomy, questioning long-term dependence. Russia adjusts its expectations, not rushing forward, waiting for fractures to widen on their own. And the United States? It gains leverage in the short term, but loses predictability in the long run. This is the paradox of pressure politics. You extract concessions today, but plant uncertainty for tomorrow. From Moscow's view, this creates opportunity, but also danger, because a weaker NATO is useful, and unpredictable America is not. Russia cannot assume alignment, cannot assume restraint, so it plays for time, avoids escalation, keeps channels open. This is why the Kremlin's response has been muted, not passive, strategic. The goal is not to provoke, it is to benefit from drift. But drift does not stay contained. Eventually, it collides with reality. And when it does, pressure becomes crisis. Which brings us to the second escalation. The second escalation did not come from Europe. It came from elsewhere, from places where Russia once felt secure. Suddenly, familiar ground shifted. In the Middle East, American force re-entered the equation, not cautiously, decisively. Russian partners were weakened. Russian influence narrowed. Then came pressure in Venezuela, a symbolic blow, a reminder that reach still matters. Even at sea, lines were crossed. A Russian-flagged tanker seized, signals sent. This was not random. It was assertion. For Moscow, the message was unsettling. While Washington sowed doubt among allies, it showed no hesitation confronting adversaries. This duality created strategic whiplash. On one front, NATO unity frayed. On another, American power pressed harder. Russia had expected a bargain, a deal on Ukraine, sanctions relief, normalization. None came. Instead, pressure accumulated, quietly, relentlessly. This was the second crisis, not loud, but consequential, because it forced the Kremlin to confront reality. Trump was not predictable, not pliable, and transactions cut both ways. So Russia recalculated again. Lower expectations, higher caution. And as Moscow adjusted, ordinary people began to feel the effects. Now the story reaches you. Not presidents, not generals, you. Because when great powers hesitate, the cost is never abstract. It shows up in prices, in insecurity, in uncertainty. If Europe doubts its shield, you feel it through inflation, through higher defense spending, through fewer social guarantees. If war drags on without resolution, energy stays volatile, markets stay nervous, and while leaders posture, ordinary people absorb the shock. In Ukraine, the toll is obvious. Lives disrupted, cities strained. But the ripple travels further. Confidence is fragile, and once shaken, it spreads anxiety across borders. You may not follow geopolitics, but geopolitics follows you. Every time trust erodes, someone pays the price. And this is where the danger deepens. Because prolonged uncertainty does not freeze systems, it distorts them. Governments make short-term choices. Companies delay investment. Households grow cautious. This is the human cost of strategic drift. If this resonates with you, stay with me. Because the next impact is not local, it is global. The impact does not stop at borders. Because when the Atlantic system wobbles, the entire world recalibrates. In Asia, allies watch closely. If commitments in Europe can be questioned, so can promises elsewhere. In the global south, neutrality becomes strategy. Why choose sides when the pillars themselves seem unstable? For China, this moment is instructive, not because it plans to intervene, but because it studies patterns. Power, after all, is learned behavior. If Western unity weakens, room opens for parallel orders, alternative rules, competing norms. Trade routes become political tools. Energy flows gain leverage. Even the Arctic, once peripheral, turns strategic. Not as a battlefield, but as a signal. Who sets rules? Who enforces them? Who hesitates? For Russia, distraction is useful. For China, ambiguity is valuable. But for the global system, this is destabilizing. Because order depends on clarity, and clarity is fading. As alliances strain, the risk is not immediate war, it is miscalculation. Small moves, wrong assumptions, delayed responses. That is how crises cascade. And once that process begins, no actor fully controls it. Which leaves us with one unavoidable question. Where does this go next? The future does not arrive as a single outcome. It branches. From this moment, 3 paths emerge. The first is stabilization. Tension cools. Trust is partially repaired. The United States reassures Europe, not perfectly, but credibly enough. NATO adapts, more European responsibility, clearer American red lines. Russia gains little, but avoids isolation. This is the best case, but does not break. The second path is drift. No collapse, no repair. Alliances function, barely. Europe hedges. America improvises. Russia waits. Ukraine remains unresolved. Sanctions linger. Uncertainty becomes permanent. This is the most likely outcome. Not dramatic, but corrosive. The third path is fracture. Trust fails completely. Europe doubts the guarantee. America doubles down on leverage. Russia tests limits. Small crises multiply. Misjudgments stack. Not because war is desired, but because restraint erodes. This is the danger zone. History shows us something uncomfortable. Systems rarely collapse from one blow. They unravel from accumulated doubt. Which path we take depends less on strength and more on clarity. And clarity, right now, is in short supply. That brings us to the final question. What does all of this mean? This story does not end with Greenland. It ends with a choice, but one revealed through behavior. Every signal sent, every promise questioned, every silence noticed. Power is not only the ability to act, it is the ability to be believed. Right now, belief is under strain. The transatlantic system was never perfect, but it was predictable, and predictability kept the peace. When leaders treat alliances as transactions, they gain leverage, but they spend trust, and trust, once spent, is slow to rebuild. For Russia, this moment is tempting. For Europe, it is unsettling. For the United States, it is a test of identity. What kind of power does it want to be? The danger is not immediate collapse. It is gradual decay. History teaches us that systems fail not when enemies attack, but when guardians hesitate. If you want to understand what comes next, this is where to look. Not at headlines, at credibility. Because the future of order will be decided less by force and more by belief. If this analysis helps sharpen your perspective, stay with me, share it, and join me in the next conversation where we examine what happens when belief finally breaks.